Hi, boys and girls. I hope everyone had a nice long weekend. I'm Mrs. Wallace, and I will be your reading teacher this week. So, we have some really fun books lined up this week, and the first book that we're going to read is one of my absolute favorite books I love to read, and it is called Ruby the Copycat. Does anyone know what a copycat is? I want you to look at the picture on the front cover to see if you can figure out what you think a copycat is if you don't know what it is already. Ooh, the girls are wearing the same outfits, aren't they? They are. They're wearing a purple, it looks like a purple dress with some flowers on it. Oh, and look, they both have red bows in their hair. They're both writing math problems on the board. So we're going to see and read and find out if we can figure out what a copycat is, okay? Ruby the Copycat. Monday was Ruby's first day in Miss Hart's class. Class, this is Ruby, announced Miss Hart. Ruby, you may use the empty desk behind Angela. Angela is the girl with the pretty red bow in her hair. Angela smiled at Ruby. Ruby smiled at Angela's bow and tiptoed to her seat. So here they are. This is Ruby. Oh, how do you think Ruby's feeling? I want you to think when you first came to school. Probably a little bit shy, right? And here's Angela with the red bow. And this is where Ruby's going to sit. So I want you to also, when we're reading this book, I want you to be thinking about how Ruby changed from the beginning of the story to the end of the story. I hope everyone had a pleasant weekend, said Miss Hart. Does anyone have something to share? I was the flower girl at my sister's wedding, said Angela. That's exciting, said Mrs. Hart. Ruby raised her hand halfway. I was the flower girl at my sister's wedding, too. What a coincidence, said Miss Hart. Angela turned and smiled at Ruby. Ruby smiled at the top of Angela's head. Class, please take out your reading books, said Miss Hart. Oh, wonder what's going to happen next. At lunchtime, Ruby hopped all the way home on one foot. When Ruby came back to school, she was wearing a red bow in her hair. She slid into her seat behind Angela. I like your bow, whispered Angela. I like yours too, whispered Ruby. Class, please take out your math books, said Miss Hart. Oh, so now they look the same, don't they? They both have red bows. On Tuesday morning, Angela wore a sweater with daisies on it. At lunchtime, Ruby hopped home sideways. When Ruby came back to school after lunch, she was wearing a sweater with daisies on it. I like your sweater, whispered Angela. I like yours too, whispered Ruby. Oh, now do we think maybe what a copycat is? A copycat is when you do something and then someone copies you. It can be kind of annoying sometimes. On Wednesday, Angela wore a hand-painted t-shirt with matching sneakers. After lunch, Ruby hopped back to school, also wearing a hand-painted t-shirt with matching sneakers. Why are you sitting like that? Whispered Angela. Wet paint, said Ruby. Do you think that she just had that outfit at home? No, at lunchtime she went home and made it. On Thursday morning, during sharing time, Angela modeled the flower girl dress she wore at her sister's wedding. Ruby modeled her flower girl dress too, right after lunch. Angela didn't whisper anything. Oh, look at Angela's face. Does she look very happy that Ruby is copying her? No, it starts to get annoying, doesn't it? And it's not just a coincidence anymore. It wasn't just like an accident that they wore the same thing. Ruby was going home on lunchtime and she was looking and seeing what Angela wore. And then at lunchtime she was going home and switching into it, wasn't she? And why didn't Angela whisper anything to Ruby today? Right, because she's probably really annoyed with her. By coincidence, on Friday morning, both girls wore red and lavender striped dresses. So guess what? Sometimes this happens here at school. When they both got to school, they were wearing the same exact thing. Not because they copied each other. They didn't know they were both going to wear that. But just because it was a coincidence. At lunchtime, Angela raced home. What do you think is going to happen? Let's look. When Angela came back to school, she was wearing a black dress. Oh, look at her face. Look at Ruby's face. Ruby's kind of wondering what's going on. On Friday afternoon, Miss Hart asked everyone to write a short poem. Who would like to read first? Asked Miss Hart. Angela raised her hand. She stood by her desk and read, I had a cat I could not see because it stayed in back of me. It was a very loyal pet. It's sad we never really met. That was very good, said Miss Hart. Now who's next? Miss Hart looked around the room. Oh, Ruby! Ruby stood and recited slowly. I had a nice pet who I never met because it always stayed behind me, and I'm sure it was a cat too. Ruby smiled at the back of Angela's head. Someone whispered. Ruby sat down. What a coincidence, murmured Miss Hart. Did Ruby come up with that poem all on her own? No, she copied Angela. Do you think maybe Angela would really like Ruby if Ruby would just go ahead and be herself? Yeah, probably. Angela scribbled something on a piece of paper. She passed it to Ruby. The note said, You copied me. I'm telling Miss Hart. P.S. I hate your hair that way. Oh no, look at Ruby's face. She has a tear. Ruby buried her chin in the collar of her blouse, so she's like this. A big tear rolled down her nose and plopped onto the note. When the bell rang, Miss Hart sent everyone home except Ruby. Miss Hart closed the door of the schoolroom and sat on the edge of Ruby's desk. Ruby, dear, she said gently, you don't need to copy everything Angela does. You can be anything you want to be, but be Ruby first. I like Ruby. Miss Hart smiled at Ruby. Ruby smiled at Miss Hart's beautiful polished fingernails. She has some very nice painted nails. Have a nice weekend, said Miss Hart. Have a nice weekend, said Ruby. On Monday morning, Miss Hart said, I hope everyone had a pleasant weekend. I did. I went to the opera. Miss Hart looked around the room. Does anyone have something to share? Ruby waved her hand. Glued to every finger was a pink plastic fingernail. I went to the opera too, said Ruby. She did not, whispered Angela. Miss Hart folded her hands and looked very serious. Ruby, dear, said Miss Hart gently, did you do anything else this weekend? Do you think she really went to the opera? Probably not. Look, now she's copying the teacher. Ruby peeled off a fingernail. I hopped, said Ruby. The class giggled. Ruby's ears turned red. So they turned red because she's probably feeling a little bit embarrassed. Look at her face here. But I did. I hopped around the picnic table 10 times. Ruby looked around the room. Watch. Ruby sprang from her desk. She hopped forward. She hopped backwards. She hopped sideways with both eyes shut. The class cheered and clapped their hands to the beat of Ruby's feet. Ruby was the best hopper they had ever seen. Miss Hart turned on the tape player and said, follow the leader, do the Ruby hop. So Ruby led the class around the room while everyone copied her. Oh, so now Ruby got to be the leader. And at noon, Ruby and Angela hopped home for lunch together. The end. So I want you to think about our main character, Ruby. Okay? How could we describe Ruby at the beginning of the story? I want you to think about when she was copying Angela. Was she a little selfish? Was she rude? Maybe she was mean. Maybe she was greedy. She could have also been feeling a little insecure, as we could say it. Maybe like she didn't want the kid, she didn't think the kids would like her. So she wanted to just be like the other kids that they already liked. Okay? And at the end of the story, she turned into a nice kid that everyone ended up liking because she was herself, wasn't she? So it's always important to be yourself. Tomorrow we're going to read another story that has a similar character in it. It's kind of a similar story. It's a really funny one. You guys are going to love it. And then we're going to compare those two stories together. So the last thing we're going to do before we go is we're going to go over our new sight words this week, and I will teach you guys the actions. So the first word is N-E-W. This is the word new. So when we go like this, new, you guys do it. New. Very good. Like a new car or a new toy. The next word is G-I-V-E. Give. Okay? So we can pretend we're giving a dog a bone. Give. You can see my hands. Give. Give a dog a bone. Okay? So maybe you want to crouch down low, like you're really giving your dog a treat or a bone. Give. The next word is T-H-E-M, them. Them. Let them in. So we're going to take our arm and we're going to pretend it's a gate. Open to let them in. Close it to keep them out. Them. You guys do it. Them. Good job. Ooh, that has our digraph TH in it too. The next one is M-A-K-E, make. And we can pretend to make the bed. Oh, so put up the covers. Maybe fluff the pillow. Make. Okay. The next one, ooh, this is one of my favorite words. P-L-A-Y, play. And my favorite sport is baseball, so we can pretend like we're holding a bat and swing and hit the ball. Play. You guys do it. Play. And the last one, S-A-Y, say. And we're going to pretend we're taking a picture. Say cheese. Say. Good job, boys and girls, today. And make sure you tune in tomorrow to hear our story. See you later. Bye.